Y'all come in and hear about the low country soul and the dry Texas heat. Let's talk about the grand, sprawling narrative of Dallas, a story spun not just on the screen, but woven into the very fabric of the world's common tongue, a true, glistening Southern Gothic tale. The moment this tale began to unfold, it wasn't just a television show. It was a global phenomenon, a whispered secret that traveled faster than a low-country hurricane. It aired in every corner of the earth, from bustling cities to quiet villages, and people recognized the echoes of an old, familiar sorrow. At its very heart, it was a retelling of the star-crossed lovers, Bobby and Pam, a Romeo and Juliet saga where the Montagues and Capulets wore 10-gallon hats and drilled for black gold. Now, before Dallas came along, the nighttime soap opera, that genre of secrets and grand houses, was seen as a woman's domain. But the power of this story, y'all, was that it turned that gentle genre on its head and gave it a raw, masculine edge. Here were cowboys and cattle, oil wells and salacious trysts with a secretary, all done up with a sophisticated low-country sheen. At the center of the storm was the Ewan family, led by the patriarch Jock and the elegant matriarch Ellie. They were the bedrock, though that rock was fissured with deep cracks. You had their sons, Bobby, the golden boy, who married into the enemy family, J.R., the conniving snake, married to the long-suffering Sue Ellen, and the artistic, troubled son Gary, and his fragile wife Baleen, always grasping for a piece they couldn't find, their daughter Lucy caught in the middle. And let's not forget Ray, the loyal ranch hand who, in a twist as sharp as a snake's bite, was revealed to be a long-lost brother. Ray found his solace with his wife, Donna. The tragedy was rooted in the ancient feud, the one that pitted the Ewans against Pam's kin, her righteous brother Cliff and their bitter old daddy Willard. Like a Tennessee Williams drama, their venom was less shouted than it was beautifully, poetically verbalized, a deep-seated hatred passed down like a family ring. What made Dallas a true Southern Gothic masterpiece was its unflinching gaze into the human soul's dark corners, topics we only whisper about in the humid heat of the South. Other shows had touched on infidelity, family struggle, alcoholism, and mental health, but they tied them neatly up in an hour's time with a bow of good feeling. Not here. In this saga, these sins and sorrows lasted for seasons and years, burrowing into the characters' lives like kudzu, never offering a clean end. They tackled the unspeakable, the cold dread of breast cancer, the silent horror of sexual assault, and that one topic that was never named, only alluded to with a million euphemisms back then, but which the show brought into the light. And then there was the cultural thunderclap. Who shot J.R.? That cliffhanger wasn't just television, it was a moment where the world stopped breathing. The sensation was so immense that even Her Majesty's own Queen Mother across the Great Pond reportedly tried to pry the answer from a reluctant soul. Dallas showed us what we've always known in the quiet desperation of the Low Country, that our greatest enemies are found in the branches of our family tree. The betrayal was always familial. Kristen shooting J.R. in a moment of desperate rage, the dark, cold heart of Catherine orchestrating the death of Bobby, and J.R.'s constant, cruel manipulation that drove Gary and Baleen away to California, chasing a piece they'd never catch. The brother versus brother and wife versus wife struggle for control of the kingdom was a constant, vicious performance. And through it all, it was the matriarch Ellie whose grief and quiet strength could put a stop to the mayhem with a sharp word, or more devastatingly, the stroke of her pen, settling the uncomfortable truth with a finality that spoke louder than any scream. Set in the faraway Texas, the story felt distinctly Southern in its soul. The lavish balls, the raw barbecues, the deep-seated betrayals, it held the same weight, the same air of faded grandeur and inherited sin that you might find in the powerful pages of Margaret Mitchell, John Jakes, or indeed Tennessee Williams himself. The style of telling, the low country refined drawl, turned every cruel word into a piece of devastating poetry, honoring the oral performance tradition of storytelling found in the South from the low country to the Smokies, around the Gulf, and then following the sun to the dry Texas plains, where a story's power lies in the rhythmic, mesmerizing delivery. The show's influence stretched far beyond the drama. It was a template for every serialized evening drama that followed. It made the cliffhanger a required national event, and its influence on fashion was undeniable, turning big hair, broad shoulders, and opulent jewels into an international statement of power and luxury. Perhaps the most astonishing part of this tale's journey is how it traveled behind the Iron Curtain, y'all. It was shown in communist countries, supposedly to reinforce the idea of the evil waste and consumption in America. But the plan backfired, y'all. Instead of seeing depravity, the people saw the dazzling, seemingly limitless possibilities. They saw the dream, the wealth, and the freedom, albeit a dysfunctional one. That one TV show, that single, complicated Southern Gothic family, is said to have contributed, in its own small way, to the parting of the Iron Curtain and the eventual falling of the Berlin Wall. It was more than a story. It was a prophecy.
Honey, darling, have you been hitting that bottle again? You wrapped that up nice and neat like an episode of the Waltons. You're ignoring some mighty interesting parts. Now hold my beer and let your loving common-law husband tell how this story really unfurled. The great drama of the Ewings wasn't ever satisfied with a clean ending, see? The moment Gary and Valine got tired of JR's dust and manipulation, they just packed their bags and moved on to that quieter place, Knott's Landing, where their own troubles, dark as they were, could grow in the shadow of the main house. Now, as the seasons rolled, the next generation started kicking up dust. We got John Ross, J.R. and Sue Ellen's son, with the devil in his eyes, and Christopher, Bobby and Pam's adopted boy, trying to be the white hat. The battle lines were drawn all over again. And speaking of dust, let's talk about that dream season. You can't just skip over the fact that for a whole year, the man we knew as Bobby was dead and gone. It was all Pam's dream, a fever that erased the pain like cheap whiskey. That's a trick from the Black Hills storytelling tradition, where the old gods can simply unmake a tragedy with a snap of their fingers. That stunt, y'all, was a move for the ages. And Sue Ellen, that poor, beautiful wreck, went all the way to Skid Row, drowning in the bottom of a glass, only to claw her way back up to become a pillar of sobriety and power. She earned that steel spine. As for Ellie, the original matriarch, a perfectly lovely actress, tried to briefly move into the role, bless her heart, but she just wasn't up to the task of filling Ellie's house dresses and comfortable shoes. The women folk eventually started leaving, and they didn't go quiet. Pam vanished in a fiery exit that left her broken and scarred. Donna made a sweeping, ladylike exit, dignified and firm. And Sue Ellen, she didn't just walk out, she left with enough evidence to hang 'em all, her final, beautiful revenge. J.R., Ray, and Bobby all found new wives and new enemies, the cycle of the Ewing's curse always turning. The final chapter of the original story was a masterclass in Southern despair. J.R.'s conversation with the devil in the finale, standing at the abyss, a bottle of bourbon and a pistol as his company. It was the only ending worthy of that magnificent scoundrel. And we wisely ignored the follow-up movies, just like the new revival did, because sometimes you just gotta let the dust settle where it lies. The 2012 revival saw the story shift to the young blood, John Ross and Christopher squaring off over the land, and Cliff's daughter Pamela brought back to continue the feud. Bobby was there, running the ranch with a new Ewing-worthy wife. Sue Ellen was running for governor, the ultimate power play. And J.R., he was in a catatonic state, silent and waiting until the story got good enough for him to wake up for. But even in a new century, reality requires an ending. The loss of the man who played J.R. meant the on-screen demise of the grand villain. His funeral was the finest piece of Southern Gothic theater imaginable. The will revealed his final trick, J.R.'s revenge on Cliff from the grave, a spectacular final flourish of spite. The wake for J.R. brought a line of ex-wives, ex-lovers, and other Ewings, all with a score to settle, except for Pam. Turns out, she really is dead. And even though the revival carried on for another season, it was Sue Ellen's drunken graveside eulogy for J.R. that brought this very Gothic, very Southern tale to a worthy, heartbreaking, and final end. She stood over the grave of the only man who ever truly matched her sorrow and her steel. And that, my friend, is where the story of the Ewings truly stopped casting its shadow. Now, you want a bourbon or a sweet tea?